of the 2-hour-long Magic Mechanic Show. Here's the man himself, Larry Perry.
Hey, thank you so much. Hey, folks, it's 3 o'clock, and I'm Larry Perry, and you're tuned in to the Magic Mechanic Radio Show. It is me. My voice is a little rough. I've been fighting a cold this week. Hey, so you new listeners know this is an interactive automotive and mechanical advice program where you call in with your car problems and just about anything mechanical. I don't care, motor homes, boats, four-wheelers, it doesn't matter. It's been our pleasure to do so for, well, now 32 years. Me personally, I'm an automotive shop owner and been a master auto technician since 1982. I don't know it all. I don't guess anybody does, but, you know, I've been around the block a few times, and so if you got a car issue or any type of a automotive question, I'm probably a pretty good person to run it past. To make the program work, we need your calls, and the lines are open at 844-580-9326. I do want to mention we love to hear from the ladies out there in the audience, and if you're listening online from out of state, make sure you give us a call and check in with us. And remember, all your calls and your car questions, well, they get indexed and they get placed on our new Magic Mechanic YouTube channel. So other folks searching for answers like yours will be able to get the same needed information. So just by you calling in, why, you could help hundreds of people with the same type of issues. Think about it. Folks will be able to play back your car questions and hear my comments when they don't even have gas cars anymore. Think about that. So we'll be around for a long time, as long as the internet lasts, I guess, anyway. Dash warning lights, poor fuel economy, oil consumption, AC, maybe your wipers aren't working. You notice we're starting to get a little bit of rain. We're heading into that rainy season. You know, and that's a good topic to think about, too. Real quick, make sure you got good wiper blades. Folks, I don't care if you did just replace them last year. You're lucky if they last a year here in Central Florida. The sun bakes the daggone things so bad here in the summertime that you got to replace the wiper blades pretty often here in Central Florida if you're new to our climate. So wiper blades don't last very long, you know. So when they start streaking, get you a new set. Another thing, too, is, and, you know, especially if you're new here in Central Florida, when it rains here in the summertime, it doesn't just rain. Anybody who lives here knows what I'm talking about. It literally falls out of the sky in buckets. So not only do you have some horrible rush hour driving sometimes, but you know, you really got to pay attention to the tread depth of your tires. If not, you're going to hydroplane as soon as you hit 55 miles an hour. And I'm not kidding you. You do not try to get the last little bit of tire wear off of those tires that are 6 years old, because that will get you in trouble here in Central Florida. You know, so make sure you've got plenty of tread depth above the wear bar that runs laterally across the tire. If you don't, then like I said, especially if it's a lighter vehicle, rear-wheel drive like a Mustang or a Charger or Challenger, something along those lines, those are the worst when it comes to hydroplaning and winding up in the median, and hopefully you're not the one causing the big traffic jam and the later on in the afternoons. Maybe you got a warranty question, antique and classic car problems or issues or fixes. I love to talk about the old stuff. Not that I'm that old, but I like to talk about the older cars. You know what I mean. Yeah, I got a couple gray hairs, but you know, I use a little of that beard wash, you know, so it doesn't look as gray as it probably should. So, but I still like to talk about the old cars. And we do this on any gas, hybrid, electric, diesel vehicle. Also, remember, I have a complete database of all the listed recalls, technical service bulletins. All you need to do is give us a call, 844-580-9326. And I don't mean to insult anybody's intelligence, but I like to dumb it down just a little bit with the phone number, because if you were to give me a phone number, I probably wouldn't be able to remember it. But the easy way to remember it so you can call in is if you can remember the 844 part and the station that you're listening to, which is the old 580 WDBO. If you can remember the 844 and the 580 WDBO, that's all you got to dial. Just 844, and then you'll dial the 580, and then you'll convert the letters to numbers, which is 9326. And that's what you use for WDBO. So you knew that before I even mentioned it. All you got to do is give our producer the year, make, and model of your vehicle and a description of your problem, and you'll be placed on a brief hold, and we will take your call in the order that it is received. Next caller will be number 4, and if you're after that, it'll be number 5. So you see how it works. So go ahead and give us a holler. And like I said, folks, I love to hear from the ladies out there. This is not a male-dominant show, for goodness sakes. You ladies have got to call us up. And, I mean, you want your cars to last a long time, too, right? And there's nothing bad about calling into an automotive show. I'm not that bad. I promise I won't bite, but our producer may. I don't know. Hey, also remember, for immediate help, you can call the shop number and speak to JD. I think he's going to be around today. 407-629-2661. And we want to mention, and this is a cool thing that we do every Saturday at around 4:36 in the afternoon. It's called our open mic time, you know. So what we do is you call in and leave an open mic about a car question, oil question, synthetic oil question, AMS oil question, used car question, and we play all those back at around 4:36 this afternoon. And you can, if you don't have the app, all you got to do is go to WDBO.com on your smartphone and just hit the download. And what it'll do is it'll upload the app, and you can hit the open mic feature on your phone, and you can leave not only a question from the Magic Mechanic, you can leave important traffic information during rush hour, a wreck, a road that's closed, or anything like that. And you know what? They relay it during the news breaks on the morning or afternoon drive. So you're actually helping your neighbors and your fellow motorists at the same time. So just go to WDBO.com and you get that app, and make sure you leave me an open mic. I think last week we had one. That was so embarrassing. I'm about ready to tear up my mechanic's license here. Nobody needs me anymore. But we will get to those after the bottom of the 4 o'clock news break. Hey, listen, you can also ask a car question by emailing me, Larry@magicmechanic.com. We're in the middle of some changes with our website and stuff, so it's probably better if you just go to Larry@magicmechanic.com. I can't guarantee I'll get to all of them during the show, but if I can't fit them in, I will answer them around the first of the week, probably early Monday morning, or if I get a break tomorrow, I may even answer a bunch of them as well. I think we're going to stay here in Orlando. We're going to talk to Paul. He's got a 2015 Subaru. And, Paul, you got an AC problem.
Okay, Larry, this is Paul. We've talked a couple of times about this specific problem where I had freon leak over where the high and low pressure goes into the TXV valve. I put a set of O-rings in, ended up doing it a second time, and it looked like I was in good shape at that point. And I had no dye coming out. I check it all the time, but there was always dye on the block, the TXV block. I never knew if it was blowback from where it used to be leaking or not. So I always used to clean it. But now, once again, I lost the charge, and we were up in Octane over the weekend, and so it kind of hung in, we made it back home, I charged it up again, and it's cooking again. But it looks like I'm probably going to have to pull the TVX out and put O-rings in that one. Very disappointing what's, going on. I've never experienced this much with any car, all the systems I worked on. And one interesting phenomena is that when it was working partially, we had cool air. The air on the passenger side was much cooler. It was actually cold, much cooler than the air coming out of the left side, the driver's side.
That's common. That is common when your refrigerant is low.
Yeah, I haven't come across that yet, but I thought that was an interesting phenomenon. But one day we're going to talk about quadrideck cars, but today I'm going to stick with the Subaru and just see if you have any comment why I'm just
Paul,
this,
listen. I'm gonna tell you. I got hard-headed mechanics, even the ones that work for me, and some over years past. They believe that adding dye to the AC system is the holy grail. Me, I think it is. If you've got a gross leak and it's in an area that you can actually see, then, that's fine. But in most cases, you got, maybe a little leakage around, at the bottom of the AC compressor, somewhere buried that you can't even see. Maybe a condenser up towards the top. It's got a slow leak. There's no oil or there's no dye, because everything tries to run out towards the bottom of everything. I'm telling you, the dye is a good thing. But me personally, there is no replacement for an electronic leak detector. That is the holy grail as far as I'm concerned. A lot of people like to use the dye and stuff, but it's like this. All right, let's just say, for an example, you've got a leak in your evaporator that's encased in an evaporator case, hidden in behind the dash of the car. It could be leaking like a sieve, and you're never going to see the dye if it is leaking. So an electronic leak detector, any do-it-yourselfer that takes care of his own vehicles, his family vehicles, stuff like that, I'm telling you, if you buy a Snap-on leak detector or Blue Point or something like that, them things get expensive. I mean, you'd be $500-600. But you can buy inexpensive ones online, something, consumer grade type of leak detector. And the only thing I could warn you about it is just make sure when you're not using it, take the batteries out, because that's the only thing that really kills them, is batteries go bad and messes up the circuit boards inside of them. But an electronic leak detector for AC, 134, and, now with this YF 1234 refrigerant, folks, do you all know that stuff is almost $200 a pound now? Can you imagine if your AC system holds 5 pounds of refrigerant, like on a pretty good size bus or something like that, you're looking at $1,000 just in refrigerant. Now, Paul, I'll tell you what, that'll take all that'll take all of the do-it-yourselfer out of it when you start buying YF refrigerant. 134 right now, you're still pretty lucky, because I think it's still like $50-60 a pound. But when you start getting into the YF that they use in the newer vehicles, it is crazy money. But seriously, if I was you, go online, find you an electronic leak detector. You can pinpoint exactly what's leaking and where. You can feed it down through your AC vents all the way down into the evaporator case. If that evaporator's leaking like a sieve, you're going to know it, and you're going to know that it's going to be more than just those O-rings that you continually keep replacing to no avail. Paul, thank you so much for being our first caller today, and make sure you give us a call back and check in and let us know how you're progressing with this. There's always professional help out there if you need it, right?
Larry Perry, we're going to go straight back to the phone lines to Jim Ryan in Deltona. Jim, you have a 1997 Dodge 2500 diesel. What's your question for the Magic Mechanic?
Yeah, I got my the throttle position sensor.
Mm-hmm.
I put a new one on because I started losing the tachometer stopped working. First, I started out with the weight to start and everything on the diesel engine, and then changed out the throttle sensor, and it started working again, and now it's intermittent. It's like when it warms up, it keeps working, because it senses for the torque converter and everything in the transmission shifting.
Yeah, it does. Jim, explain to me exactly what it's doing now.
When I first started up, the tachometer doesn't work.
Okay.
And so if I could put it, I'll shift it if I have to. I don't use the vehicle a lot, but I just had to run a big old dump trailer to the dump the other day, and so I do it manually. And then once it got up to operating temperature, it started working.
Okay. Now, so the tach, you're saying that it doesn't work when you first start the truck up, but after it runs a little bit, then it'll go ahead and start working.
Yeah, and even the weight to start and all that stuff for the heaters and everything, which, they've got to be a certain temperature before they actually turn on. But all the lights come on. They used to normally.
So is your glow plug light coming on now, or your weight to start light coming on now?
No. Now, when I first start, you can hear it click, but you don't see the light until it warms up. So I'm wondering, do I have the gap wrong? Because you had to have a non-metallic, gap gauge, which I took a caliper and pieces of paper to get to the 50,000s.
You're talking about for the throttle position sensor adjustment.
Yeah.
Jim, I don't think that's got really. I don't think that has any bearing on this. I really don't. See, you'll have on that engine, you'll have a crank or a cam sensor, something that the computer system has to read for tach signal. You see what I'm saying? The throttle position sensor, it's going to shift the transmission and.
Yeah, because the engine will run fine. It's just for the transmission to work. Okay.
But there's got to be something else going on if your wait to start light's not coming on. You've got a couple weird electrical things going on here. I'm gonna let me tell you what I would do. Do you know where the vehicle's PCM is, the actual computer?
Yeah.
Okay, let me tell you what I'd like for you to do, but because you've got a whole bunch of weirdness going on here, that's a better way of saying it. When I get one like this, Jim, I'm going to tell you, where that connector goes into that PCM, there might be 60, they may be 100 wires going into that thing. And this being an older vehicle, what is the chances of 1 out of 100 of those wires maybe not getting a good contact? So what I like to do is I like to unplug that PCM, the computer itself, and plug the daggone thing back in. You might even want to go ahead and spray it down with a little bit of electrical contact cleaner that you can pick up at any of your local parts stores. And it doesn't even really hurt if you put a little dielectric grease on it and just slap it back together and then start it up and see what it does. It being a 97, make sure you disconnect the battery before you start pulling the connector off of the PCM. But let's try that. That could be, we might be dealing with the world's cheapest fix, but, it sounds to me like that you've got a couple connections that may be not getting, proper connection. And I'd like to do that to start with. Now, if you're still having some issues with it after the fact, either email me, Larry@magicmechanic.com. I was going to pull up the wiring schematic. There's a temp sensor on this thing that I think actually helps control the glow plug controller on it, and I couldn't pull it up to find out if your truck actually had it or not. So I'm going to have to dig back into our Mitchell system to find out. I'll have to look at the wiring schematic. But contact me. I'll help you through this thing. We're talking about car manufacturers actually getting rid of, what we have known all of our lives. I'm like, it's pretty crazy. But the reason that they say that they don't want to put AM in a lot of the vehicles, especially electric vehicles, is because of the electric motor interference that it causes the AM signal. So, that's kind of a situation where, I can understand that if you've got electrical interference, it's going to come across as it picks up through the antenna, and you're going to have whining noises and everything else. I don't know how much truth there is to that. But see, what they're doing is they're wanting to get rid of all the analog and go strictly digital signals for everything now. Just like the GPS and you think about it like this. Most of your new Fords and most of your newer cars, they don't even use anything from the transmission for your speedometer. It's all GPS driven, So your actual speedometer is reading GPS, global positioning satellites, as opposed to a old-fashioned speedometer cable, So what it's going to boil down to is what you basically have programmed. It's going to be just like your smart TVs, that you can watch Netflix or Hulu or whatever off of. It's all going to be digital through the internet. Everything in your car. I've got a late model C8 Corvette. It's its own internet hotspot. So all you have to just voice recognition, everything. You just tell the car what you want it to do or what you want to listen to, and it just automatically dials it in. And what that's going to be what all cars are going to become. We're going through some of the biggest, craziest transitions in the automotive industry right now that, good or bad, I guess we're all going to kind of have to live with some of this stuff. But, getting rid of the AM, for me, I've been on the air for 32 years. Don't you dare think that, pulling the AM out from underneath me isn't going to hurt. That's heartbreaking to even consider, And like you like to listen to the news, the weather, the traffic, and everything on a local station. That's what WDBO is. A lot of people don't realize this, but that was actually really the first radio station here in Florida. And WDBO was actually what they referred to as way down by Orlando. That's where WDBO actually got its calling letters from. And that was when they were doing test signals from Georgia to here in Orlando to see how far they could actually receive signals. And, it's really, the history of AM radio is really exciting when you think about it and how it all come about, especially here locally. And, for them to sit around and start talking about getting rid of it, it's pretty heart-wrenching when you think about it. But FM's going to be soon to follow as well. It's all going to become, you talk to your car and tell it what you want to do. Maybe they'll start making wives like that as well. Just tell it what to do and it just automatically does it. That'd be pretty cool, huh? Hey, George, listen, thank you so much for your call. And I'm sorry I don't have better news for you, brother.
Thank you.
Thank you, George. We're going to go to Brian in Castleberry, who has a question about his 1999 Lexus 300. Brian, you're on with the Magic Mechanic.
Hi, Larry.
Hey.
Yes, the transmission only goes into reverse until it gets the operating temperature, and it'll go into drive after moving the shifter around during the time it takes to get the operating temperature. The level is okay, and the condition is okay. The fluid was changed 2 years ago, and we just replaced the vehicle speed sensor. Do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, and it's not good, Brian. Let me tell you what's happening here. See, and this is one of the reasons that I swear by AMSOIL. It's like this. If you use the AMSOIL, which is a polyalpha olefin base stock, they use that in the transmission fluids and, of course, the engine oils. And they do one better. They put ester in along with that polyalpha olefin base stock. Now, what you wind up with is a fluid or an oil that's always going to be conditioning a rubber seal, like the piston seals inside of a transmission or the valve guide seals inside of your engine. And it keeps them soft and pliable. Rear main seals, front seals. You rarely ever have a leak or a seal failure with an AMSOIL engine or transmission. Over a period of time, if you don't use a polyalpha olefin with an ester base, it causes seals to get hard and they shrink. And so in your case, what's happening is you're starting the vehicle up, you're putting it in drive, and it's laughing at you because you got fluid pressure going to the clutch drum, but the piston is not engaging the clutches. It's bypassing that old, hard, shrunken, dried out, hard seal. But after it runs a little bit and the fluid temperature gets up a little bit, maybe 25, 30 degrees, it swells that seal up just enough in that clutch drum to go ahead and allow that piston to engage the clutches. And, and it'll work fine. Everything will work just like a brand new transmission until the fluid gets cold again and the transmission cools down. Then you're back into the same mess all over again. If I put a pressure gauge on your transmission, what would happen is I'd start it up, and when it's cold, and I'd put it in drive, and it's going to read 0 pressure for low and reverse. I mean, it'll for first gear, it's actually just going to read 0. But as the engine warms up, while it sets in drive or you're moving the shifter around, it'll slowly, you see that pressure start increasing, and it's because that seal, that piston seal inside that clutch drum is finally getting warm enough to allow it to go ahead and engage and compress and engage the clutches. It's really a sad when you get one like this because the problem that you're having with the transmission is a $2 seal, but the whole entire transmission has to be removed and completely disassembled in order to replace it. So when you get into a case like this, it's due for a complete overhaul. So I wish I had better news. I will tell you this, Brian. And, I normally am not an additive mechanic and a can guy. But in this case here, nothing ventured, nothing gained. You know, you may want to try a transmission, a fluid conditioner of some sort that may swell the seals up a little bit and may buy you a little bit of time. I mean, the inevitable is going to be rebuild the transmission down the road. There's not really anything you're going to be able to do to get away from that. But, you know, you might want to buy a Pine or whatever, some of these miracle transmission additives and just dump it in there. Bottom line is, the transmission is going to have to wind up coming out and being rebuilt if you keep the car. But this here, well, shoot, I wouldn't advise you against it under the circumstances. We know what worst case scenario is. This thing may buy, adding an additive like that and continuing on doing what you're doing, it may make it better and may get it to the point where, you can limp it along for a few more months. Heck, who knows? We'll shoot for a year and see what happens. But in most cases, I would never recommend you to do it. But in this case here, hey, the damage is already done. It's age that's gotten the best of it. Try an additive, see what happens. Worst case scenario, transmission is still going to have to come out and be overhauled. So give it a shot, Brian. Let us know what happens, buddy.
The car has 250,000 miles on it.
Well, it's still a young baby. Let's give it a try. Let's you've got your money's worth out of the first transmission anyway. Try an additive, see if we can't get another 250,000 mile out of it. Good luck, Brian.
Thank you, Brian. We're going to go to Steve in Orlando. He's got a question on a 2006 Honda Odyssey. Steve from Orlando, you're live with the Magic Mechanic.
Steve, are you with us? Yeah, go ahead, buddy.
I'm with you.
All right.
A 2006 Honda Odyssey, 235,000 miles. I'm keep getting that 0496 code regarding vapor in the tank. I did change the fuel cap and the purge valve. I also noticed when I add fuel to it, it's giving me a hard start.
Okay.
And if the code is clear, it can run all day, but as soon as it sits overnight, the code comes back.
Okay. Well, what that's telling you is that there is something with the evaporative fuel system that is gone a little crazy on it. And see, when you shut a vehicle off to go and refill it, the tank, it will actually vent itself so that you can add fuel to the tank without it continually keep kicking off the fuel nozzle. In this case here, something, either a purge valve or a control solenoid, something's gone wacky in this system. And when you fill it all the way up, it's allowing fuel to go into the intake, raw gasoline. And that's the reason you're having the kind of issue that you're having there. There's a couple things that I would recommend you do. One of them is to have what is called a smoke test performed on the evaporative fuel system. It's a test where you actually hook a machine up to the fuel system, and it pumps the whole system full of a non-toxic smoke, and you can see it emit from any leakage anywhere in the system. That would be the first thing I would do, is check for a gross or a small evaporative fuel system leak. Second thing that I would do would be to hook one of these fancy, expensive scan tools to it and start doing some bilateral testing of the purge valve, the control solenoid, and everything else, just to see if I could control it and work it through, an outside scan tool, just to see if that stuff is actually working or not. But in a case like this, a lot of times what you'll wind up with is things like a charcoal canister, where that actually removes a fuel vapor, start coming apart. Next thing you know, you've got little particles of charcoal going through the evaporative fuel system, it contaminates the system, prevents the control solenoids from working properly. Those are the types of things we usually see on a higher mileage vehicle like this.
I did remove the charcoal canister and take a look to see if there's anything in there. Everything looks fine, normal. I checked all the hoses. Everything is connected. There's no cracks in any of the hoses. They're pretty sturdy. And like I said, I guess I can try the smoke test.
Yeah, the smoke test is really, what we do is if we're trying to find a leak of sort, what we wind up doing is do the smoke test. If you still don't have anything, you can't see where there's a smoke leak or whatever, a lot of times then we go ahead and we add air pressure to the fuel system. And then I make my guys get underneath the vehicle with a spray bottle of soap and literally start soaping down the whole entire system to look for any bubbles. A lot of times that's last resort if you're trying to find an evaporative fuel system leak. But in this case here, I think you've got more than one problem. I think you've got a control problem with the evaporative control solenoid. I think there's something going on with it. You could have replaced the solenoid, but that doesn't mean it fixed the problem if you've got a problem with the computer system controlling it properly. But I think that there's something else going on other than just a leak.
O'clock. Going to the phones now. Ralph in Winter Springs has a question about his 2016 automotive vehicle. Ralph, you're on air with the Magic Mechanic.
Hi, good afternoon. So I've got something called, I think it's called ghost touching on the screen, the radio screen, the navigation screen. And if I do my research, it shows that it should be covered. It's the 2016. 2013s to the 2016s were covered under warranty. They told me yesterday that mine, for some reason, is not. So let's say it's not covered under warranty. Do you know of anything to do with that?
Yeah, you replace the actual screen itself.
Well, we were looking at close to $1,000.
Yeah, probably. I usually, to be honest with you, Ralph, I usually get those things, and then I just have one of my techs pull the system out of the car. I put it on my desk upstairs at the shop and literally disassemble the whole darn thing and put it back together, and they work, But there's some labor time involved with it, You got the tech, it has to R&R it, and then you got the brain surgeon upstairs with his desk. It has to take it all apart and put the new screen in. But it's common on those. We do quite a few of them. But it's cheaper than replacing the whole entire unit, so it kind of keep that in mind. It's worth fixing. Probably get it done for a little less than $1,000, but just par of the course. You're welcome to email me, Larry at magicmechanic.com. Give me all the info on the car, and I'll see what we can get a screen for and what you'd be looking at to get that took care of. But it's a very common problem. I do a ton of those, so I appreciate your call, Ralph.
Thanks.
Questions. If you have any problem with your car or truck, hearing a sound you've never heard before, your wheels shaking around, coming to a stop, or your dashboard lit up like a Christmas tree, we can help you with all those problems like that. You just have to call 844-580-9326. That is 844-580-9326. We'll answer all your automotive questions. I'm here with the Magic Mechanic himself, Larry Perry. Before we get to Larry here, I just want to remind everybody we are under a severe thunderstorm warning for Orange, Osceola, and Brevard. Orange and Osceola counties until 4:45, and a severe thunderstorm warning for Brevard until 4:15. It looks at this time the tornado warning has been dropped. But you should still see cover out there with these crazy storms. Larry, I don't know if people should be on the road, but hey, they can call on in, and you can answer any of their automotive questions for them.
Well, let's just hope that they're not throwing a life jacket out of their car window. Yeah. Now, it's like I was talking earlier. Folks, listen, it is if you're new to Central Florida, it is very important. There's two things. One is wiper blades do not last as long as they did up north. And number two, you don't wear tires all the way to they look as slick as a onion, Here in Central Florida, because of the rain and the way we get rain, and sometimes you run into poor runoff issues, even out on the interstates, on your toll roads. Don't wear a tire all the way out. You need to have some tread there. I'm not kidding you. Or you will hydroplane and you wind up in the median and probably take 4 or 5 cars with you. So it's very important. Wipers, number one. It's not uncommon to have to replace them every 6-7 months here in Central Florida. And tires, don't try to wear them all the way out. You know how your dad was, he'd kick a tire and he'd say, I'd get another 15,000 miles out of them babies, Hey, listen, you don't do that here in Central Florida or you'll wind up with a big issue. You don't wear a tire all the way out till it's bald because your car's going to be floating down the highway when we get these big rains. Hey, welcome to the second hour of the Magic Mechanic Radio Show. It's a show where you call in, you ask your automotive questions, and you can't beat the price because it's absolutely free. That number is 844-580-9326. And not to, insult anybody's intelligence, but I always say dumb it down a little bit. The phone number, if you can remember the 844 part and the station you're listening to, which is 580 WDBO, 580 WDBO, see, that's easy to remember. I can remember that. And then you add the 844 part to it, and that gets you right on through. So it's not like you're having to sit there and teletype a phone number or try to remember something, like the Declaration of Independence. It's 844-580 WDBO. And the WDBO, all you got to do is convert the letters to numbers. It's that simple. 844-580 WDBO. Also, we take your automotive questions and my comments, and we place them on the new YouTube channel so other folks that may be able to find and the same help that you seek. That way they can put in your make and model, and if it's something pertinent to what they're looking up on the internet, hey, that thing will pop up, and they get a whole radio show dedicated to the problem that they're searching for. So it's pretty cool. Plus, you can play it back anytime you want. Number, once again, is 844-580 WDBO. To speak to JD at the Magic Mechanic, that shop number is 407-629-2661. Our sponsors are very important to the show. We all pitch in to bring you the program every week. So if you enjoy it, please patronize our sponsors and tell them you heard about them here on the Magic Mechanic Radio Show. Orlando Auto Upholstery. It had to be interior, convertible tops, carpets, seats, vinyl, leather, cloth upholstery, headliners, door panels, anything like that, whether it be the family car or something that you're restoring in the garage. Keep them in mind. They do excellent work. And folks, there's not a lot of artisan trades like that left out here. So take advantage of them. They do excellent work. They're very affordable. You can find them at OrlandoAutoUpholstery.com. Give them a call at 407-898-2351. AMSOIL Synthetics for your car, truck, van, SUV, boat, motorcycle, bulldozer, lawn equipment, you name it. AMSOIL makes a lubricant for it. Well, folks, the reason that they've been around sponsoring the show since 1992 and been making synthetic oil, the very first ones for automotive use in 1972, is because they got an incredible product. Their oils, being a PAO-based stock oil with ester, the oil actually runs to heat and friction as opposed to getting hot and thin and running away. It works backwards of 99% of all the oils on the market. AMSOIL does put their money where their mouth is. They warranty your engine against lubrication failure, providing you install their oil in sound equipment. That's all they ask. If the motor's not got a rod knock or a piston slapping in the cylinder, you put AMSOIL in it and you have an oil-related failure, they're going to take care of it 100%. It's like getting a free extended warranty on your engine. Think about that. And there's no mileage stipulations on it. They don't care how many miles are on the car because they know once you put AMSOIL in it, it's like a preservative. It's going to last as long as you want it to. So, a superior product. I've got countless thousands and thousands and thousands of customers that'll absolutely swear by it. So, you want to find out more? Go to AMSOIL.com. Jasper Engines and Transmissions. When it's time to replace an engine or transmission, that's an expensive venture nowadays. I mean, $10,000 is just, that's almost gotten to the point where that's an average price to put a reman motor in a vehicle in a lot of cases. So you got to look at it like this. If you're going to spend that kind of money repowering a vehicle, you want it to count. And when I say make it count, you better make sure you got the best available warranty that there is. And we pretty much go with if we're doing a reman motor or transmission, we go with the Jaspers. Our customers get a 100,000-mile nationwide warranty anywhere in the continental United States. They'll send you to a shop at one of their installers. They'll expedite a motor or transmission to them, and you'll be in and out of there probably within 48 hours at the most. And if you've got a rental vehicle involved with it, Jasper's there to help you with that as well. It's an 80-year-old company. 80 years they've been in business. And right now they are so busy building and remanufacturing engines that it's just, some of the engines are very hard to get. There's just such a supply and demand issue going on, and parts to build these things. It's just, but they are a constant, steady provider for engines and transmissions throughout the whole United States. Like I said, they're really hard to beat. An excellent company, been around forever, and they stand behind their products. Whereas a lot of these Johnny-come-lately machine shops, I'll tell you, let's see. I think my dad used to say, "You'll buy a pig in a poke." yeah, very, very easily can be done. You might wind up with you might wind up thinking you're saving a couple $100, but it won't be nowhere near the stress that you're going to encounter. And the last but not least, the Magic Mechanic Auto Service Center, located in Orlando, Florida. Engines, transmissions, brakes, suspension, steering, electrical repairs, and, of course, AMSOIL synthetic lubricants. Visit us at magicmechanic.com. Let's get back to the phones. Who's up next? Oh, I think we're going to go to Gary here in Orlando.
Gary, you're live with the Magic Mechanic.
Thank you very much.
Hey, Gary. Thanks for holding on.
Hey, yeah. Duramax diesel 2005. 2 years ago, I had to replace the injection module. Got lucky and got a used one. Had it programmed at Orange Buick. And then maybe 3 years ago. Anyhow, last weekend, the truck started shutting off on me. I could get out, prime the pump on top of the fuel filter, get it to crank. It might run 2 minutes. It might run 2 hours. I talked to JD one day, went and stopped in the shop there and talked to him. I pulled loose the pin connectors, cleaned them out real good with a contact cleaner, blew them out with an air hose, everything. Put it all back together, cranked it up, ran like a piece of junk. So just out of a whim, I took and sprayed every opening I could find around those connectors with the CRC contact cleaner.
Okay.
Cranked it up the next day, drove it all over the place. Cranked it must have been 10 times, probably 50 miles on it or so. Next day, I'm driving along, it shut down on me again. So, but I can still get out, prime the pump, crank it right back up, and you never know. And it may run, like I say, 30 minutes to 30 days or 30 seconds. So,
Gary, have you ever replaced the filter head for the fuel filter, the actual part the filter screws into?
No, I have not.
Well, let's put that on our high priority list, okay? They're not that much money. Let's get one, because it's like this. If you're pumping if you're pumping the fuel at the filter, and if that thing is not hard as a rock when you go to try to pump it, that means there's air getting in that system. And that filter head's got some O-rings in it, and you've got the pump there that can also leak. It can actually get air into the system and cause you all kinds of grief. But that filter head's got to be replaced. That's public enemy number one. There's only one other thing that I will tell you is that this is just a regular pickup truck, right?
Correct.
Do you have?
Yes.
Let me ask you this: do you have any rust in the bed or anything like that, or can water, leak through the bed for any reason? Or I got to ask these questions.
Yeah, it could a little bit. I had a fifth wheel receiver back there for several years, and I took it out and I left those half-inch holes where it was mounted.
All right, let me tell you something.
In the bed, but I have no rust.
All right, okay, all right. Let me tell you why I ask. I've had these things come in, and this is crazy. I mean, this is crazy. Now that I'm thinking about it, there's a couple other things too. One of them is I had one of these come in one time, and something similar. It wasn't a rusted situation, but water was allowed to leak through the bed of the vehicle right onto the top of the fuel tank. And the actual seal underneath the sending unit area where it pulls the fuel out of the tank was allowing water to get in that tank. And I'm telling you, that poor guy, I mean, he had fought that thing for years because of water getting down on top of the fuel tank. And what was happening is he was getting some seepage of that water going into the tank through the seal where the sending unit is. So don't underestimate that. Just because there's holes back there, if it's running down on top of the fuel tank, you could have an issue. And if that is the case, get you a big old piece of rubber flashing of some sort, fish it over the top of the tank, and put some sort of a fuel dryer in there or water or something, to try to clear out that water. But it does happen. I've seen that happen 2 times. The other thing, too, is you said you replaced the fuel. Well, this wouldn't have anything to do if you had if the primer on the fuel head, on the filter head is spongy. That means there's air getting in the system. I just point blank. I was going to say there is a wiring harness that runs to the FICM, which is your fuel injection control module. And it's tied up. The wiring harness is tied up in behind the alternator, and a lot of times the bracket that it's wire tied to will cut into that harness. But I don't think that's your problem. Let's replace that filter head to start with, and maybe take some silicone sealer and just plug up those holes so water doesn't run directly through it. Because if it is and it's getting on top of the fuel tank, that could cause us a problem. If it's not right now, it could cause us a problem later on. Gary, give that a shot. Let me know how it works out. I hope that filter head takes care of all your problems that we do run into on occasion. We've had even the older Kia Sorentos, headlights going off mysteriously, and then all of a sudden they'll usually pop back on. The switches are something that we do replace quite a bit of. Now, the other thing that we run into is your fuse and relay center. There is a micro relay in it that can overheat, and it will actually kick the lights off on occasion. So we have had that happen, and we have had to replace those. So it's kind of like this: when you got it doing it to the point where it's so sporadic, and a technician can't duplicate the problem, that makes it very difficult to diagnose. But usually the switch or either the fuse and relay center, one of the two, is usually the culprit in this case. I guess the best way to probably be able to diagnose it would be to, if you've got it on auto and let it just sit and run in a shop, for a long period of time, and maybe have, some test lights actually hooked up to see when you're actually missing the voltage to the headlights, I guess would really be about the only way to actually pinpoint the problem. I did search technical service bulletins on the car for this problem, and there wasn't anything that came up. But if you do a search online, there's multiple people having the same types of issues that you are. And in most cases, if you just turn the headlight back off a little bit and then flick it back to auto, it usually, comes back on. But, in a case like this, I don't really know what to tell you, because you're in a situation where a mechanic can't duplicate the problem when you take it in. The only other thing would be to start replacing parts and hope that takes care of it. Replacing the switch, and then probably turn around and having to go and replace a fuse and relay center. I mean, those would be some pretty expensive ventures, just because we're guessing here. But if it was just one headlight or something like that, it'd be a different story. But you got 2 of them that's going out. And especially when you're driving at night, that can be a very dangerous situation. Dan, I'll tell you what, email me, larry@magicmechanic.com. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of do a little more of a search and see if I can't get some feedback on what some of these other folks have went through. You can also do that search yourself. Just put in 2018 Kia Sorento, headlights go off by themselves, and look and see if you can't come up with something as well. Maybe between the 2 of us, we can get some answers here. I appreciate your call, and you have a fantastic weekend.
That's 844-580-9326. Larry, before we get back to the phones, we had a couple of open mics for you, a couple of good questions. Let's air number 1.
Hey, Larry, Jay from Orlando. Enjoy the show very much. Question is life expectancy of tires and the age of the tire. Purchased a 2010 Toyota Highlander, has a full-size spare. Tire has not been touched. What about rotating that tire in, purchasing new tires, or would you leave that as a spare? How would you go about seeing if that tire has aged out? That's my question.
Well, the number one, the tire is aged out. As far as it being suitable for a spare tire, I don't see a problem with that. But anytime, I think it is after 6-7 years, the tire is actually aged out. But the tire's not being used to throw it on at some point and use it as a spare. I doubt that there's an issue with that. I wouldn't leave it on there permanently. I definitely wouldn't try to, rotate it into service full time, by no means. And this is another thing too. When you get a tire that, let's say right now it's 13 years old, the chances of you finding that exact manufacturer and series of tire is probably going to be next to impossible. A manufacturer usually makes a particular type of tire or series of tire for usually sometimes 4, maybe 5 years, and then they rename it and redesign the tire. So in this case here, spare tire, fine. To run it continually and try to wear it out, I don't get that chintzy. It's just not worth it.
All right, let's go to open mic number 2.
Hello, Larry. This is Paul with 2015 Subaru. Just wanted to let you know I do have an electronic leak detector for decades, and I started with that on the car to find a Freon leak. I never could find it, and that's why I started using the dye. So I'll try to use it again and see if I can come up with anything new. Thanks for the update.
Yeah, he said, folks, if you wasn't tuned in towards the first of the program, or hour number 1, he's got a Subaru that has been beating him up relentlessly to him trying to find a refrigerant leak. And so he keeps replacing O-rings and stuff like that. And what I basically told him is that, an electronic leak detector, a lot of times you can take it, all the way into the evaporator case. Even if you need to, you can also pull the blower motor out of the evaporator case and take an electronic leak detector all the way into the evaporator to pinpoint and find a leak. But, Paul, it sounds like you've already got the electronic leak detector. Let's see, what do they say in Star Wars? May the Force be with you. We wish you a lot of luck.
All right, let's go back to the phones. We go. Ron from Davenport's been waiting for some time. Ron, you're live with Larry Perry.
Hey, how you doing, Paul?
Good, Ron. What you got going on?
I have got an '05 Silverado. Try to make it short, I was pressure washing, trying to get the gas out from my pressure washer, so I just thought I'd go over top of the truck and go underneath it and all that. Anyway, after I did that, the code came up. The light came on the truck. I checked it. It said knock resistant.
Yeah.
I cleared it out, and it lasted about 2 weeks, and it jumped back on. The truck runs fine, runs great. I have no problem. I think I did something when I was pressure washing it.
I think so, too. You know what? This is one of those cases, Ron. The motor's not making any abnormal noises, correct?
It runs great.
Okay. Yeah. You've gotten that connector wet. And on that one there, if I'm not mistaken, you can't get to the knock sensor on this, right? It's underneath the intake?
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
When you cleaned it, you've gotten something damp and wet in there. I'm going to tell you like this, Ron, I would give it another couple weeks and see if it clears up by itself. I have a feeling that it will, but it's going to be a nuisance until it does. I mean, you know what your alternative is to probably pull the whole intake plenum and everything else off the engine. I'd really hate for you to do that, because if you didn't have the issue before you pressure cleaned it, my gut feeling is you got a connector that's got some moisture in it. And once it dries out, everything's probably just going to go right straight back to normal. But in the meantime, like I said, you'll just have to continually keep clearing the code until finally it gets to the point where it's dried out enough to where it won't set the code anymore. So, yeah, a lot of times underneath those intakes, there's actually some drains sometimes in the back of the engine block for anything that accumulates in that lifter valley, so to speak, underneath the intake plenum. So it can drain if it does get wet. A lot of times those areas will get plugged up, and it won't allow all the moisture to deliver, run back out of the back of it. And, if you had a little puddle in there or something like that, that would kind of explain it. But I would just keep clearing the code for the next couple of weeks. I mean, if it starts giving you any fail-safe or goes into limp mode or anything like that, you may have to get a little more serious about it and actually have the intake, pulled off of it and have that area inspected. But, I think you just keep clearing the code for the next couple of weeks. Most likely it'll dry itself out, and you'll probably be fine with it. I appreciate your call, and I wish you the best with this, Ron.
Thank you, Ron. To Randy in Orlando we go, who has a question about a 2009 Toyota Scion XD. Randy, you're on with the Magic Mechanic.
Hey, Larry. Thanks for taking my call. Again, my Scion, the air conditioning system is kind of acting a little peculiar. It works intermittently. When I'm going down the road, sometimes it'll work. It'll work really well for a while, then it'll just stop. But it always seems to work for a period of time when I come to a stop. Like, let's say I'm going about 50 or 60, and I come to a traffic light and I stop, and then it all of a sudden starts working really, really well for 2, 3, 4 minutes.
Yeah.
And then it'll get warm again.
All right. Well, the first thing I've got to ask you, Randy, is have you had the refrigerant level actually checked in the system itself?
I have added refrigerant to it, and
still does the same thing.
Refrigerant to it, it still does the same thing.
Okay,
yes.
All right. That's what I needed to know. All right, this is a situation. You have a variable displacement compressor, meaning if you were to look at the front of your compressor, even when the system is off, you will see the front of the compressor, or what we would refer to as the clutch, actually turning all the time. There's really not even an electrical connector going to the front of that compressor. So that compressor is always turning because it's a variable displacement compressor. Now, what dictates how much that compressor pumps is there is a control valve towards the back of that AC compressor. Yours was one of the early ones for Toyota. These electronic control valves, what they do is by opening or closing, that's what actually dictates how much that compressor will pump. When that control valve is all the way open, the compressor is basically just bypassing everything. It's not pumping through the system. It's just pumping through the compressor. So hopefully that helps you understand how that thing works. And then by that control valve moving as it needs to adjust the temperature inside the car, that's when it'll start closing a little bit. And when it does, that actually starts forcing the refrigerant throughout the whole entire system. So you've got circulation with the refrigerant. When those control valves start going bad, you get all kinds of crazy stuff, just exactly like you're dealing with. Now, a person... this is one of the other things I want to kind of mention. So other folks that's got these later model cars with variable displacement compressors. These variable displacement compressors, I'm telling you, most of them will last the life of a vehicle. They usually are never a problem with them. They usually just keep right on working. But what usually goes bad is the control valves. And when those control valves start to fail, you'll get intermittent AC, and when it works great. And then, like you said, it worked 4 minutes, and then all of a sudden you're sweating driving down the interstate. But that's what usually happens. Now, you can do this one of two ways. One of them is you can get a remanufactured compressor that'll come with a control valve, and you can install it and evacuate it the whole 9 yards. Or you can, evacuate the system, recycle what refrigerant's in there and take the compressor off and replace just the control valve, put it back on there, evacuate the system into a vacuum and charge it back up, and it'll work absolutely fine. And that same compressor may keep working for the next rest of the car's life. But that's usually what goes wrong with the newer vehicles. I mean, we replace those all the time. It's like this. If you take the car into a shop, and you tell them what's going on with it, and you get a mechanic. Well, Folks, listen, mechanics are very far and few between. Real mechanics are very far and few between nowadays. But most mechanics are going to, they're going to tell the service writer or advisor, like, it needs a compressor, it needs a dryer, expansion valve, condenser, and you're going to leave with about a $3,500 bill. The other scenario is the compressor can be removed, control valve installed, put the same compressor back on the car, evacuate it, and charge it up, and like I said, it'll probably last the life of the vehicle. And you're talking about a $500, maybe $600 job, depending on the price of the control valve, with the labor and recharging the system and the whole 9 yards, as opposed to what could potentially be way over $3,000. And it wouldn't surprise me if that's your original estimate. But I just want you to understand, and let the other folks out here listening, that when this happens, if you have a variable displacement compressor, usually it's not the compressor, and it doesn't need everything that bolts to the whole entire system. It's just a stupid electronic control valve that goes bad. Now, I've let out all of these mechanical secrets that are hidden and hush-hush, and you got to know the secret handshake. Now everybody knows they can probably get their AC fixed for $500-600 as opposed to $3,000 or $4,000. Isn't that neat? All right. Thanks for listening to the Magic Mechanics Show, folks. We're going to break. We'll be back here for our lightning round here in just a few minutes.
For you today, it's time for the lightning round. We're going to go straight back to the phones. Rob in Orlando, you're live with Larry Perry.
Rob, you with us?
Hi, Larry. Thanks for taking my call.
Hey, no problem.
I try to be as brief as possible. Does the octane on a gas will give you some type of more performance on a vehicle?
In some cases, Rob, and this is a great question. Number one, if you have a turbocharged vehicle, which, nowadays we're using much smaller engines that produce a lot more horsepower. And the fuel that you use in those vehicles will determine the actual power or horsepower that you can get out of the motor. And let me explain how this works. When you use a lower octane fuel in a turbocharged engine or a supercharged motor, which isn't as common as turbocharging, the engine itself, via a knock sensor, will actually tell the computer system that it needs to retard the timing somewhat and actually increase the fuel disbursement out of the fuel injectors to offset any type of detonation. This happens so subtly you don't even know that it happened. But it does actually rob a little horsepower off the top end of the engine itself. If you drive, to church on Sundays with your grandmother's cat and you barely, you're just driving a car extremely easy, you would never notice it. But if you're out on the road and you go to pass somebody or whatever and you're running 87 octane, you're going to notice a little bit of a decrease in the horsepower of the vehicle as opposed to where if you were running a higher octane fuel. I always like to tell folks, it's not ever going to hurt anything, to top a tank off with 87 if you got a turbocharged car, or if your car requires premium only and you run a tank of 87 in it. If you drive the vehicle like a normal vehicle, you're probably never even going to notice the difference on it. And one of the crazy things is in some vehicles, and this is my customers base, they'll tell you that a lot of them will get better fuel economy with regular 87 octane as opposed to a higher octane fuel. And if your car just likes lower octane fuel, by all means run it. The biggest thing to be concerned with is when you start getting into your pickup trucks like your F-150s with twin turbos and stuff like that, you do want to try to run a minimum of around 89 octane. You don't have to run 93, but you do want to, or 92, but you do want to try to run pretty much the mid-grade in it, just so you can overcome any spark knock or detonation or having the timing retarded considerably and losing a lot of the power, especially if you're doing any towing. Now, if you're doing any towing with your pickup truck, I'm going to tell you point blank, you need to run nothing but 93 in it. Under any towing conditions, you want to run the highest octane fuel that you can get your hands on. So, but that's pretty much it in a nutshell. I'm not going to sit there and tell anybody that if they run 87 in a vehicle that they're going to have major problems. the way that the fuel is dispersed into the engines nowadays, we're bypassing intake valves and being, direct injected right directly into a cylinder. So, the fuel has a lot more. You don't lose as much of that fuel's potency as you used to. You run 87 octane in a carbureted car. Well, by the time the fuel got out of the carburetor and set on top of a hot intake valve, waiting for it to open before that fuel actually got into a cylinder, you lost so much of that fuel's potency that it just took a lot more to run a vehicle than it does nowadays. And that's one of the biggest reasons we get such better fuel economy. So, yeah, as far as you're concerned, run the 87, but, you may just want to run a tank of higher octane fuel in it once in a while. Folks, listen, I thank everybody for tuning in. You listeners, customers, show sponsors, a reason to do the show when I have a job. You can tune in every Saturday at 3 p.m. Eastern Time in Central Florida on 107.3 FM, HD Radio 96.52, and AM 580 worldwide at WDBO.com. And click Listen Live or just tell your smart speaker to play WDBO Radio every Saturday at 3 p.m. If you need help with your vehicle, you can always call Magic Mechanic at 407-629-2661. Visit our website, magicmechanic.com. You can also email your car questions directly to me, Larry at magicmechanic.com. Don't forget to check out the Magic Mechanic YouTube channel and click on subscribe. And until next week, be safe in and out of your car, and we'll see you back here next Saturday at 3 p.m. For automotive information, maybe you got automotive questions on cars, trucks, vans, SUVs. Maybe you're thinking about purchasing a used vehicle, and maybe you just want my opinion. Tune in to the Magic Mechanic radio show every Saturday, 3 to 5 p.m. on WDBO.com. Also tune in to our Magic Mechanic YouTube channel, and don't forget to subscribe. And we'll all get together, maybe fix a few cars while we're at it.